Okay, so after reading this page, I'm going to switch back to our slides and I'm going to take a look at one of the strategies that we're working on this week. So, we're talking about making predictions, and I want to model for you how I was thinking about this story as I was reading. So, right here, I have an excerpt from the story on page 311. And I start to think about this character, Miguel, and I start to think about what I already know about starting new schools because I have switched this year from elementary to middle school. Based on those things, I see Miguel's friends from elementary school are going to different schools. So I'm going to predict that Miguel is going to be unhappy in his new school. However, when we get to the middle of this second paragraph and I hear about Jake, who I hear he's not friends with, I start to think that maybe the author brought him into the picture because Jake and Miguel are going to become friends. So, once again, I'm using my background knowledge. I'm also using what the author is showing me in the text to help me base a prediction. It may be right and it may be wrong. Let's continue reading to see how the story turns out.
By the end of October, Jake and I had become good friends. It happened because I was so hopeless trying to do my math homework. I have a disdain for math, especially fractions. To me, fractions are a foreign language. I may as well be trying to learn Greek or Latin. So one day, I approached Jake after school. Hey, Jake, I began. I was wondering if you could help you with the math homework, right? He said, completing my sentence. Sure, I'd be happy to help you, Miguel. I was stunned because, to be truthful, I wasn't sure until that moment if Jake even knew my name. And yet, here he was, happy to save me from drowning in my sea of math problems. That night, Jake and I had a study session, and it was time well spent. I must admit that Jake's a superb math teacher. He used slices of pizza pie to explain the idea of eighths and sixteenths. And by the end of the night, I finally understood why 8/16 is the same as 1/2. The next day in class, I was even able to answer one of the math problems our teacher put on the chalkboard. She was surprised when I raised my hand, and guess what? So was I.
So, again, thinking about making predictions, the prediction that I previously made about Jake and Miguel is coming true. They have become friendly. So, as I continue to make predictions, I wonder how is the story going to end? Maybe Miguel introduces Jake to some of the old friends from elementary school, and now they all become a big group of friends. Whoops, went too far, so sorry.
They say time flies when you're having fun, and I guess it's really true. I can't believe winter vacation is almost here. The school days have been flying by like a jet plane. I suppose it's because I'm a much more focused student, especially in math, than I ever was before. Until this year, I always looked forward to the prospect of a school break. Now I actually feel sad that I'll be away from middle school for 2 weeks. The other day, the most amazing thing happened when our teacher gave us a math brain teaser. She asked, if you wrote all the numbers from 1 to 100, how many times would you write a 9? The question was harder than it seemed. Most of the students said 10, although some clever kids said 11 because they realized that 99 has two nines, not just one. But Jake and I were the only students with the correct answer 20. Everyone else forgot to count all the 90s. Jake and I plan to hang out during the winter break. He promised to show me the math museum downtown. It won't just be us, however, since all my new friends from middle school will come too. You see, even though I now have a completely different perspective on math, some things haven't changed. I'm still in the middle of a large circle of friends.
Okay, so before we head back to our slides, let's talk about making those connections. So, our essential question was thinking about the ways that we change our view of the world and ourselves. Discuss the ways that Miguel changed after he entered middle school and what caused him to change. So, He changed his view on not being with all of his friends, and he also decided that he really liked school and he liked math. So, based on his experiences, he was able to change how he felt about something that he was unsure of. All right, present. So, besides predicting, the other skill or strategy that we're working on is to compare and contrast. And if we looked back to that anchor chart, we can do that with characters, we can do that with events, and we can do that with settings. Today, we're going to talk about Miguel, his setting, and how he feels with those two settings. So, using our background knowledge, I think about elementary school and what maybe Street or Gottwalls or Paul Fly, what they were for you. And now our new school, what's Stewart Middle School like? And how are they similar? And how do we feel about them? So to begin, I know that in Miguel's old school, he was in the middle of a large circle of friends. But at his new school, he only knows one classmate, and that is Jake. When I think about what is the same about these two schools and Miguel, I know that he wants to have friends no matter where he is. That is what makes him most nervous. The third thing that we talked about before we started this story was the fact that it was realistic fiction. And again, fiction is not real, but having the word realistic before it tells me that it could be real. Could I know a boy named Miguel? Sure. Could he go to a new school with no friends? Sure. Could he be nervous about it? Sure. So the author wrote a story based on his or her own experiences, based on maybe just wanting to entertain you. And we can relate to Miguel and the situation that he was in. I did tell you that the use of figurative language also happens within a realistic fiction. One of the ones that I wanted to point out to you is towards the end of the story in the last paragraph. Miguel says the teachers shoveled tons more homework at me. So in my mind, I'm picturing a teacher standing in front of the classroom and has all this huge pile of papers, and he just takes a shovel and starts putting it on top of each kid. Now, we know that that's not what the author means, and the author is using this piece of this hyperbole or this figurative language to help us understand that elementary school didn't have nearly as much homework as middle school. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, for today, we have gone over your comprehension strategy, which was making predictions, your comprehension skill, which was comparing and contrasting, as well as the type of genre that we read in our story. For your practice activity and your assessment, you are going to be working on comparing and contrasting. I chose this next activity for your practice because it deals with something you already have prior knowledge on, and that is Native Americans. It asks you to read two paragraphs and then answer some questions about comparing and contrasting these two paragraphs. A reminder, if your teacher is asking you to do the practice activities, you do not need to turn this in. This is to help you enhance your skill of comparing and contrasting. As far as your assessment, when you finish, you are going to head over to your Google Classroom and you are going to see an assignment posted. It says Unit 5, Week 7, Online Learning Reading. Again, please look here. It says, after watching the video, your teachers and I cannot emphasize to you enough. You have to watch the video in order to do well. We're wrapping up week 7, okay, and we're getting ready to head into summer. It has been a very unusual way of learning, but your grades still count. And these are some common building blocks that you need for next year in order to be successful. So good luck this week. If you have any questions, reach out to your teachers. I also wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Ross. For those of you who have him as a teacher, you already know. For those of you who don't, he served in our military forces. And being that this is Memorial Weekend, and we do recognize those soldiers that have fallen in the active duty, We're happy that Mr. Ross is here with us, but we also want to thank him for his service to our country and for fighting for our freedom of choice. So if you get a chance, maybe you could send him an email and a big thank you. Have a great week, and we will see you back next week.